Welcome to the You Decide podcast. I'm Dr. Tiffany. We're going to bring you stories of ordinary people who have chosen to live an extraordinary life, outside of their comfort zones and into confidence, possibility, and certainty. You are just one decision away from living your most aligned life, because let's get real, that's what we all want.
All right, peeps. Today we have Rikka Brandon. I have the bio and such in the show notes. I'm just going to let her give a rundown. The essence of the call is going to be about how us alpha people adapt to people thinking that we are strong and almighty and maybe a little bitchy at times, right? You think?
Yep. Right.
We've maybe gotten that word.
Maybe.
Anyway, really talking about the strengths of the strong alpha, the risk taker, the bravery, courageous leadership, and also how we can be misunderstood, and then how that looks in relationships and in work and in life. And I think I'm just, even between you and I, how many people like us do we know that, oh my gosh, I hope that we can put some words to someone's experience on how they feel, or people that are married to us, for example.
Exactly. Those poor fools. No.
Yeah, poor fools. All right, so I'm just going to give you the mic. You just go. I want you to share a little bit about how, I don't know, where your life is, how it started, how you kind of worked into that bold role, and where we are now.
Okay, so I was born into a family where I'm the youngest of four, and there was high expectations and a lot of communication, and also, like I would say, like nobody in my family cared about your opinion unless you could back it up. So I had a kind of a blend of nature and nurture working together to really create somebody who was able to articulately state their opinion, to defend it. So I had a lot of training ground that a lot of people don't have. They grow up in families that are slightly less intense than mine. We are a whole bunch of type A people, and two of my siblings own their own companies as well. So we like to be the boss. So I grew up with that, and I had a tremendous amount of fun my first 2 years of college, like more fun than really maybe was appropriate. And so I went to be a nanny, and it was a fairly traumatic experience. And it was the moment in time when I realized I don't want to be the nanny. I want to have the nanny. And that was a really pivotal moment in my life where I just realized, like, I need to be more serious. And so I came back to college, which is about the time I met Tiff, actually, is when I just really changed from being pretty much focused on fun to recognizing I was trying to plan for my life here. And that was a really big moment for me in recognizing what I wanted to create. And then I was able to apply my natural drive to that. I am not super great at having a boss.
Me either.
I had about 4, maybe 5 bosses between 2000 and 2003 from college graduation to when I decided to start my own company at the age of 26. I like to joke now, like, you don't know what you don't know. And anyway, so that was like the beginning of my journey of really, really my independence and my strength of character and my ability to assert for myself really started getting honed, as well as my insane self-doubt and, fear of failure, and all of the ugly insecurities were also there. And so now I'm almost 17 years into owning my own company. I'm 42 years old. And it's like, as I look at young Rikka versus, current day Rikka, it's very interesting. And I think that'll be part of our fun journey on, you learn different parts of you allow different parts of your personality to really develop and shine at different stages.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the beauties of getting older is I'm much more comfortable talking about the more vulnerable sides of who I am than I would have been 15 years ago.
Yeah, because you put on, I mean, we didn't really love each other at college because we were a little bit
too many, right?
By the way, for any of you who can't see the video, aka none of you, she just rolled her eyes at me. No, we didn't actually like each other.
It's like the nicest way I could say it. Found you very bossy, and you were very rarely bossing in the same direction I was, and so that was complicated. Yeah.
That's so funny because, so interesting. I didn't,
Mhm.
in college, I didn't think I was that strong. I mean,
Yeah.
there were just lots of passive people and go with the flow. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way, just flexible.
Yeah.
Right? We know who those people were in our lives.
Mhm.
And for some reason, we hung around the ones that would just say, all right, Rikka.
Yeah, they're like, whatever you decide is good. And I'm like, fantastic, right? Let's do what I want to do, right? That's what sounds good to me. So
Right. And then Tiff came along.
yeah, and she had like weird like sports things, and I was like, what are we doing? That is unnecessary. No, but yes, and I think that is like the greatest thing of like awareness of how you show up, right? Because it's like I don't think either of us realized we were, bossy, for lack of a better term,
Right.
until it was like, oh, we're not surrounded by people that are game just to go with the flow,
Right.
right? And now we got somebody who's gonna stand up and articulate.
Right. Which is the best gift ever. And
Yes.
it's the mirror that, like, I just will continue to say, you and I, that we didn't want to see. We didn't want to see the mirror that showed bossy.
Mhm.
By the way, are you ever still called bossy?
Not to my face. But I assume it probably happens. I don't know.
For sure.
I'm not dumb enough to think, like, I would say, like, people are either for me or not for me. Luckily, most seem to be for me, but I also I'm a lot, and I'm too much for some people.
Yeah, but if they're not for you, you don't know, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Because we just talked about the crusty shells.
Yep.
We have this hard front, we have this armor, but dang, we got soft crab in there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're soft. Okay, so I want to talk about perfectionism.
Okay.
How about that? So I want to talk about the inability to be vulnerable in the beginning, because you need it to be just so in order to show different to people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't really resonate with the term perfectionist, but I also never can meet my own, it's like, I think that's like a weird disconnect just when we're talking about like our own blindness. Like, I'm not a perfectionist. I totally get good enough. And yet I'm like, although it's hardly ever good enough for me, right? Like, I'm good with, my neighbor. That's awesome. But
and that's what I mean.
Yeah. And so
that's
that I think,
talk about.
In the beginning, when I first started my company, I was so insecure and so terrified, and I was having a lot of failure. The first year was abysmal. I mean, it was like abysmal. And it was like embarrassing because I didn't think I was going to suck at it, and I did. And I knew what I needed to do to fix it, but I couldn't make myself do it. And like, it was really embarrassing and like gross. And then the second year, I hired a great person who could do the business development that I wasn't able to bring myself to do. And then we started growing, and then people started noticing. And then it's like, I still was entirely insecure and best guessing my way through it. But like, people on the outside are like, wow, you're amazing.
Yeah.
And like, pretty soon you start to think you need to meet that expectation that they've formed, because they, like now, I mean, social media wasn't really a big thing then, right? It wasn't the same as it is now, but like, you're in the paper or whatever. And so all of a sudden people expect these things from you that you start to think you have to deliver on it all the time, even though inside you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. Half the place it feels like dumb luck, right?
Yeah. So that would be what we'd say imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So can you move me through this process and how you went from that? Mm-hmm. So like first year, abysmal suck, right?
Yeah.
Second year, you figured out how to delegate, which is what you're awesome at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Figure out.
Well, I mean, it's a work in progress, but I'm much better now. But
no, but how about I rephrase? You know what you are awesome at.
Oh yeah, right? Yes. I'm super comfortable with my strengths and don't care about improving my weaknesses. Right.
100%. See that? Okay. That mentality is what is not out there a ton. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Somebody just asked me a question. If your child was great in English or average in English, and let's just say a B student in English and a D student in math, still eligible, blah, 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 blah. What would you focus on strengthening?
I have like weird vibes about grades having way too much value. So I am kind of probably an oddball here, but like, I mean, math is math. Like, certainly if they're struggling and it makes them feel bad, I would want to encourage them and support them and give them the support they want. But at the end of the day, do writing, like creative writing. Like at the end of the day, there's a calculator. Like, I mean, who cares, right? Like I, so far, don't use algebra or geometry very often. So like, but I also am a person who doesn't really like math, right? So I didn't like math as a kid. My mom was a math teacher. Like I hated it. So it's like, you know, for me, I have probably my own history there. But I think what I try to do with my children is we really want to focus on what they're naturally gifted at and what they love to do. And that just kind of goes back to that hedgehog principle. You know, what are you naturally gifted at? What do you love to do? And what can you get paid to do? And when you can find where those three things cross over, like that's where you're going to find a career that you love and thrive at. And so that is, for me, really important.
So this is the C, because when we talk about doubling down on what we're awesome at, which is what you just said, I know my strengths and I'm going to get better at them and I don't really care about my weaknesses, or you hire out your weaknesses in the entrepreneurial world.
Right.
You and I don't organize.
You know, I think it's, you know, as all things in world, right? It's not an all or nothing thing. Like you can't be like terrible at like details and continue to have a business, right? Eventually it's going to bite you in the ass. Like that's how it goes. You know, it's going to cost you a customer. It's going to like, so we need to get our weaknesses up to average or close to it, right? So like we need to be competent. But in my case, in my world, so because I'm an executive recruiter, I'm really great at getting to yes. So once the candidate is submitted and the company likes them and they're going to extend them an offer and the candidate's going to have to accept it and make a big change, there's a lot of psychology that happens in that period of that journey. And I am gifted at that journey because I can really empathize with both parties. I can be a straight communicator about what needs to happen, what isn't going to happen. Like that's unrealistic, candidate or client. You can offer that, but they may say no. And that took me a long time to get to in my life because I feel like recruiting has about 5 major steps to it. There's sourcing, there's the finding the people, there's the getting them to respond to you, then there's qualifying them, then there's submitting them, then it's managing your client, you know, managing the candidate expectations and getting everybody to yes, because it's, you know, really changing jobs is the professional equivalent of getting married. Right. So it's like people for the most part, especially at the level I deal with, it's not a decision that they like make lightly. And so that's something where we're building my business to be more focused on letting me do more of that. So even though I'm perfectly fine at sourcing and finding candidates, that is time consuming and it's not the highest and best use of my time.
Yep.
Have you read the book Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz?
No.
Okay.
I've read her book or his Profit First and
Profit First is awesome. So is Clockwork. Clockwork, one of the main premises of it is like the queen bee role of your company. And when I went through the process, I realized ours is confidence inspiring communication. And that's because I am largely giving advice and insight. That is my profession. Like your profession is very similar, right? If they don't believe you know what you're talking about, they're not going to listen to your advice. They're not going to act on your suggestions.
Right.
And so that was really pretty powerful for me when I went through that process and realized that, because I think that's also in life, right? When you can communicate confidently, you're much more likely to be listened to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how did you, coming from your strong family, of course, communication, confidence, anybody who knows the Fogelbergs knows, right? I mean, that's just upper level thinking, learning all the time. Did you ever, so when we talk about like 10xing your strengths, right? But basically I don't really care about your weaknesses. Yes, I get there's a balance, but was there ever a time that you found imbalance in the weaknesses? Like you let the insecurities come through, that imposter syndrome, you let them get the best of you. Can you just share some examples?
Yeah.
Because as alpha women, entrepreneurial women on top of that, people don't think that we're ever like.
No, that's a great question. And I have a couple. Like the one, I think I'm not like a crier, right? Some people are criers. They cry when they're happy. They cry when they're laughing. Like I'm not a crier at all. But I would say at least once a year, if not twice, I have the good old ugly cry on my bed because I've decided I am just a total like fraud and like somehow the world hasn't caught up that I don't know anything yet. And like, as pretty soon everybody's going to find out that I'm just figuring it out as I go. And like, it's always very startling to my husband because again, I don't cry very much. So then when I'm like, I'm a loser or whatever the kind of refrain is. And I think that like that being that scared is cathartic almost, and like just owning it and like letting it go. Cause I literally feel at the end of that I've sort of like thrown up all that nervous tension and all that insecurity that's been like, packing in my gut.
Yep.
And that just like, I mean, I can't predict what day that's going to happen. I certainly don't enjoy it when it happens. Like, the tank, like when you think about your tank of capacity is like, it's low and suddenly like everything's too much. That's my poor time management and time blocking probably right there. A weakness I would like to fix, but currently haven't been able to.
I don't know.
Work in progress, right? I that's what I'm like, I really want to fix that weakness, but for the love of God, it's hard. So I would say though, like when we really think about what I think has sort of molded me, and this is going back to what you asked a couple minutes ago, but my first business grew very rapidly to $1 million in 3 years. I was 29 years old. I had $1 million company. I was getting awards, and I hated my job. And I didn't like managing people. I am much more wired to be an individual contributor. I've done a lot of reframing on that. So now I'm much more of a coach and mentor type manager. But the business was, we made a lot of cash and we spent a lot of cash. So like, although there was a lot of stuff going on, there was no wealth creation. There was just churning. And I was young and my dad kept saying to me, Rikka, it's net, not gross. It's net, not gross. And I'm like, whatever, I'm going to hit $1 million before I'm 30. Haha, right? And like, it was all I cared about was hitting $1 million before I was 30, because that was like going to prove that I was a success. And I hit it, and it was this just unbelievably hollow victory. If you like, it just was like, I thought it was going to be like proof, right? Now I don't doubt myself, whatever.
I love that proof.
Yeah. And it just was like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And like from the outside, it looks like I should be really awesomely happy. And I thought, like, I just as a weird sidebar, but it was right around the time of my 10-year high school anniversary or reunion. And I was the class president. I didn't realize you were like supposed to plan this stuff. So I would have like probably not run. I don't know. I probably still would have. High school Rikka was ambitious. But anyway, I was like, I got no time for this. So my friend had done almost all the planning, and I didn't even go. And it was like, at the time I thought, this is so weird, because like right now, like I look like such a success story, and like it would be great. And I just like, I don't even care though. I don't want to talk about it. Like I know people are going to talk about it, and it's like, and it was a very weird thing to me. And I think that was like my first true awareness of like, okay, if I'm not excited about sharing this with people, like, that's bad,
or
right?
Just being it.
Yeah.
Right. Not only sharing, but.
Exactly. And so anyway, then a big part of the reason my business grew so fast was the housing market was going crazy, right? Like a rising tide floats all stupid ships and companies. And so my mistakes I was making running my company weren't so visible. And when the market contracted, it was very visible, and we lost 88% of sales year to date. So like just kind of easy math for you. If that's $100,000 coming in, now you have $12,000 that you're trying to pay your bills. And it was just unbelievably painful. And there wasn't a fix coming up, and we had committed to a lot of things because we had a big staff and we didn't need them. I joke now that like being a building products recruiter in 2008 and 2009 was like kind of like being a personal trainer to help you gain weight. Like, you want to get fatter, I can help you. And not the good muscle weight, like just the fat, squishy weight. Nobody cared about your skills. And so the business it was like awful. And like, so ultimately at the end of it, I had to lay off a bunch of people. We closed the doors, and we had to file personal bankruptcy on top of the company closing because we had personally guaranteed everything. So I went from $1 million company at 30 to bankrupt right before I turned 31, or maybe right at 31. I can't remember right now. Yeah, right, 31. And
wow.
Yeah, and everybody, like even at the time, like finally, like when, the whole thing, like I met with my dad, and he's like, this is bad. And I'm like, it's not that bad. And he's like, it's terrible. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it might be terrible now that you're forcing me to look right at this and asking hard questions. And my dad's like the sweetest guy. So I know it was hard for him. And ultimately, so long story short, we have these terrible realizations. We recognize we're going to have to go bankrupt. I'm super embarrassed because it's going to be in the paper. And also this is like when I wanted that proof I was a success at million, this is proof that I'm a failure.
Yep.
Like I was right. I'm not worth anything. I'm stupid. And so I was like, so like consumed by it and embarrassed by it and also relieved. Right. And so when you're in the middle of going bankrupt and having your business get dissolved and laying people off, like it sucks. But on the outside, on like part of me was like, oh my God, it feels like my gilded cage broke and I can do this again, but better and not have so much overhead and not make these same, I won't make these mistakes again.
Right.
And so it was just a weird thing that's super hard to explain. But it was very liberating for me. And it was also, like the year of trying to make like robbing Peter to pay Paul to make it work was exhausting.
Absolutely.
Right. So finally like surrendering to like, I can't fix this. I've literally done everything I can. I can't outthink this. I can't outsolve this was very liberating. And that was unexpected. So when people are like, oh my God, was the bankruptcy terrible? I'm like, no, the year before was god awful though. Right. If you're wondering about it.
Isn't it crazy what happens when you surrender to it? Just
and it was, so for me, one of the greatest things that happened was my mother-in-law, who is a very quiet, like I'm sure I intimidated the life out of her when I first started dating her son. She said, hey, Rikka, like you'll find out who your real friends are. And I was like, right, we're not gonna be friends because I'm a bankrupt, because like I don't actually need that friend, right? Like, right. If that is actually like me having to do this as a term, like I'll be happy without you. And that just weird remark from her like shifted everything for me of like, this isn't, and my dad had been trying to say like, this is business, this isn't you, your value as a human. But it was really clear for me at that point, this is just, it's part of my journey. And I did the best I could and I failed, and that sucks and it's embarrassing. But on the same token, like it's part of my journey. And it was just weird. And so with that, I did it. I mean, I started almost exactly the same kind of company right after. I partnered with my director of business development, who was that key hire in the beginning. And we did the same thing. And I made and took home more money in the first 8 months of that business than I had in the previous 3 years.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah. And it was, just getting clear about like, there's some things I'm great at and I should do those. It put us in a position where we could move to Mexico for a year with our kids, which would not have been possible with the bigger company. Oh, so like, it's like, I always think to people like, I'm a very, and I think this is true of all of us, kind of like direct, intense people, is we're very resilient. Like we're very good at finding the silver lining. We're very good at figuring out what we learned from that and how to go forth. And so that is a gift of mine. I will say that is, I can almost always find the silver lining, And
well, that's what I was going to ask you. I was just going to, because that first year was meaningless.
Yep.
Moneyful, meaningless.
Yep.
How did you bring meaning back into your work, AKA back into your worth? Because that's all it is.
Yep.
It was great. It was just back into believing in yourself. And do you know how that feels when it ebbs and flows now?
Yeah, I think I'm much more able to recognize it. What happened for me was like, my team was like, it's so hard. And I was like, it can't be that hard, right? So I just said, whatever client comes in, and this is like when we're failing, right? Like everything is not going well. The next client that comes in, I'm going to take it. I'll work that client. And I was still really good at recruiting. I didn't like management. I wasn't good at it. I mean, I was like, people are like, you weren't that bad, but whatever. I don't think I was great at it. And I closed $96,000 of business in 3 months. And it was like the balm for my soul of like, I am good at this. I really enjoy doing this. And I am good at this. And it's hard for other people and it's not hard for me. And so that allowed me to like go back to what I love, which is actually doing the recruiting instead of like trying to manage and get people to do it in the same way.
Yep.
And that also like bought us probably 6 months, because between Aaron and I, we were like paying for everybody else. And that, is not ideal.
No.
That, like when you're the owner, the manager, and the primary producer, that's not that business deserves to fail. And so, yeah, so I think that was it. But now, I spent a good period of time really in that lean and mean where it was like, I joke, I was like, I had a part-time job that paid really well. When my kids were little, and, I just was able to like choose my life.
Right.
And now it's still, the struggle is real, right? Where I have days that I'm like in the zone and I'm on fire. And then I have days where I am tripping and falling. Like yesterday I worked from 7 a.m. till 11 at night, except for like 2.5 hours hanging out with my kids, just because I'm so far behind on all the things. And I knew I had this, and I knew I had a coffee date today. So I'm like, I got to get it done. So I think that I feel like on the outside of time is like, I think I can tell like it's worth me spending 12 hours on the weekend to get caught up because I was sick 2 weeks ago. Like, there's like just that give and take, because I don't like how I feel when I feel like I'm doing poorly or out of control. I also don't like working weekends though. So it's like, I don't want to do it very often, but like there's times it makes sense. So my soul feels better.
Absolutely.
That was a really long-winded answer. But
how have you found that us strong alpha women, most people think we have strong boundaries, right?
Yeah.
That we're rigid and we're like this, where a lot of us actually aren't.
Right.
Tell me, and we just have a few more minutes, but like, tell me how, now that your business looks different, you have kids, you have, our values change every few years, right? We go through these transitions of growth and development and expansion. Tell me how, when there's struggle, how do I word this in terms of boundaries? Where do you feel like your boundaries are most blurred and nobody knows about it?
Yeah, people. I am like a people person, and I love people, and I believe in them, and I have like such high hopes for them, and I see such potential for them. And I am often disappointed. And that is in part because I have, I set higher expectations for people than they would for themselves. And some people rise to it, and it's awesome, and I'm the best boss they've ever had, and they're doing things they've never done before. A lot of people don't. And that I'm unsure of at this point is if I'm delusional and I see potential where there isn't, or they're not, like, I think they're at stage B in their life and they're at stage A or whatever, and they don't have that capacity. Because I think capacity is a real thing. And if you're home with toddlers, your capacity is lower than if your kids are in high school or if you're an empty nester. Like, the reality is, like, you're trying to make sure nobody dies, right? Like, that's good. They don't want to protect themselves yet. So I think that's the part where it is really, like, to your point, like, people don't see that about me. It's like, I get really invested in people and I really believe in them. And it's really hard for me to share, like, it's not working. And I also, like, I always want to think, like, okay, they can do this. And that's been a really huge transition for me in the last probably 8 months is, like, I didn't want to manage anything. Like, I don't want a manager. You don't want a manager, Tiff, right? Like, I never needed a manager. Like, I have way higher expectations for myself than anyone else. So I would just let people go. And then they would start to, like, slip. And I'd be like, I wonder if they're going to catch it.
Absolutely.
And then I'd be like, they're going to. Oh, they're not. And that part was like, and then I would sort of just watch them hang themselves, like, terrible phrasing, but, like, watch them fail and be like, and, like, nothing I can do, because, like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to put more energy into your success than you are. Like, I just will not do that. Life is too short, right? If you can meet me, we'll rock the world. Anyway, and so that part, I think, has been really a powerful transition for me of, I want to coach you. And now I can clearly say, like, here's the deal. Like, I'm not going to put more energy into this than you are. Like, I will not. I have way too much going on in my own life. But I will meet you and I will hold your hand and I will do everything I can to coach and support you. But that also means talking to you about hard stuff. That talks to you about not having enough call time. It means talking to you about not, logging everything in the database correctly. It means talking to you about the fact that I think you might not love this job, right? And, like, we, in recruiting, we call it the grays, where, like, the idea of being a recruiter, which is, like, super fun and awesome, meets the reality, which is a tremendous amount of voicemail, phone tag, and rejections, right?
Rejection,
like,
I was just going to say.
And that's the part where, like, the sexy idea of what we do, meeting the reality of what we do, can often be very discouraging for people. And so now it's like, I'm going to talk about it. And like, so I really have decided that with my direct personality, my ability to have difficult conversations, they're not difficult when you talk about them before everybody's invested. You know, it's like, hey, and also like you and I, like if we hire somebody, it's because we liked them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever hired somebody I didn't like. So if I like you enough to hire you, I certainly like you enough to make sure you're happy and fulfilled in your work. And that I think is the biggest transition of like Rikka starting and how I had to really like feel like I had to look tough and be tough. And I didn't want anyone to know that I had feelings. So I just like almost like abdication, right? Management by abdication, like, take it and run.
Absolutely.
Now getting to the point of like, hey, this is like, I know what I'm great at. I know what I suck at. Like I said to you earlier, I'm chaos incarnate, right? Like if you want somebody who's going to do the same thing the same way every day, like you should run away from me, right? I'm always thinking about what's next and what's new. And that's exciting and exhausting.
For sure. And it's also having the right team that you can say some of those things to. I mean, whether the team is your journal or your spouse or your team, your VAs, it doesn't matter. Getting some of those shiny balls out of the way so that we can actually walk on the paved path or we blaze a new path, fine, right?
Right. Or we wander in the grass barefoot for a little bit, whatever. But it's like, I think that's the part like where the struggle can be with kind of control freaks, which I relate much more to control freak than perfectionist.
Yeah.
But like, I always feel like if I can control this, if I can control what I can control, like then I feel good about it.
I see like control, force, rigidity, perfectionism, like kind of all the same. Whether it's in regards to us or our management style or our part of a relationship, it's all just what it is, right?
It is, yeah. It's different flavors of the same thing.
It's different flavors. Okay, so if you could just give one tip, one thing, I don't know. Tell me.
All right.
For them.
I think that, okay, this is sort of weird, but this is the one tip I would like to give everyone I talk to my kids about all the time. It doesn't cost you anything to give a compliment or to seek to have an experience with a person. So when you're checking out at Target, telling them that they have beautiful eyes or you like their glasses, that is something that when we give those compliments, we actually receive a lot more because you can see the true joy in the person. And that's something that I am naturally wired to do. And as I've become a parent, I've recognized like now my kids do it. And it's like, you can just see, and we realize like we get like this great feeling from it. And it's a stupid little simple thing, but I think it's, right. It's not stupid. You're right. It's like, but I think it's a really good way for people who aren't quite as direct and as, forceful as you and I are wired to be, for them to start seeing their impact, their ripple effect in the world. Like all you have to do is compliment somebody and you can see their face light up. You can see they're startled. Like most people, I tell people they have beautiful eyes all the time. And it's like, it's a joke or like eyelashes. I'm always like fascinated by long eyelashes. And I always joke like that. Like if I'm staring into your eyes weirdly, it's because I'm fascinated by them. Right. But it's like, that is a very simple way to get something back for yourself, but give something. And then I think that is a great kind of step one of really starting to think about how you can have real conversations with people and take it beyond the veneer. And that simply is the veneer, but then you're going to find the people you love and care about in your life. You're much more able to say, like with true appreciation, like you're amazing at this. Right now, you're not amazing at it. And I don't know if I can support you to get there or if I'm doing something that impacts it. But like, I think those, like that kind of taste test to get to being able to have more conversations, that and my last thing, I statements. Like I felt attacked when you said that instead of you attacked me. And I'm sure you've talked about this before, but I think that when you're trying to have a difficult conversation, that look up I statements, using I statements, just Google the life out of it. But it's basically like, we can only speak to our own experience.
Right.
So, I feel like you were implying that I didn't do my fair share when you said that. And you will find out a good third of the time, they're like, what? That's not what I meant.
Yeah.
And your hurt feelings are like unnecessary. So I guess that was a few points, but those are things I think that, maybe aren't necessarily related to being direct on the outside and a squishy marshmallow on the inside.
Yeah.
But
Because
I
the marshmallow is definitely where we hide stuff, right? Because we look like we have it all together. We act like we got it all, and we're never bothered by anything. And then we start to not even communicate about it because it's like, well, that actually happened like 2 months ago and I'm still bothered. Like, why would I ever say anything? Now, there's all these things in that imbalanced alpha, I call it, of how can we handle the balance of the squishy middle and hard outer.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll say is that there's some of us who, like, we're a work in progress, right? And you and I are 20 years into our journey, and we've learned by trial by fire. Just starting your company when you're young is like not for the faint of heart, and like to stick with it and be successful later is also for like those who are willing to walk through the fire a few times, right?
Yep.
But I think there's many people that are kind of the opposite, where they don't say anything and they swell it and then they explode. And that, I think, if people who are more tendency to do that, like by learning just to state things before you're pissed off will be so much better, even if it's a little scary. But it could be something small. But I just think that is, that is just as like that's just as goofy as those of us who appear hard and direct on the outside and are big, squishy, mellow on the inside, right? Like, absolutely. But
first step is obviously knowing who you are.
Yes.
Let's be aware
and
of
being okay with it is a good part too, right? Like, you and I are recognizing, like, we're not for everybody, but the ones we're for, we're really for.
We're really for. Yeah.
And it's okay that we're not for everybody. And it's okay that some people love us and some people are like, they're way too loud and they talk too much. Whatever. They're bossy. And that's okay, because we all are on our journey. So.
Bossy and bitchy. That's
right. Our vote, we're just right all the time. God.
Right. Thanks for sharing, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And all right, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening and being willing to go all in. Ditch the excuses and the comfort zones and make a decision that nothing can stop you. You can find the show notes below, and I'd love for you to share, subscribe, and rate this podcast, but only if you love it.